also with the Disaster Management Training and Education Center for Africa in Bloemfontein. So with that, yeah, welcome to the session again. And I think we can start to have a very joyful tour through different careers. Kenny, back to you.
Thank you. Before we get into the details, a little bit about the background of this network, the University Search Support Group. This group has been established, I think, in 2018 or 19, with the idea that we are providing some support, some guidance, and an entry point for the next generation of humanitarians, whether they're students, the youth around the globe, anybody who's interested in the humanitarian field but doesn't know the 600 acronyms that the UN uses, doesn't know how to navigate the HPW website, or doesn't know which networks to attend. We are here to facilitate that entry. And likewise, we're also offering them a podium to speak up, to join the sessions, to share their ideas with the humanitarian community and support them in that progress. Welcome. So this is, we do this among other things through different sessions, but you will also see and hear the students and the young generation in other sessions throughout this HPW, and even all things going well at the plenary closing of the HPW as well. So this is briefly the agenda for today. After this short opening welcome, we're going to go into a panel where students will share their experiences along with, in different stages of their career, starting to more senior, with short presentations on their journey. And of course, we also invite you to ask questions, reflections, see if we recognize common elements. We also have joining us from the Directorate General of the European Union, DG ECHO, on European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid. Joining us, Felix Blok, the head of the Knowledge Network, the unit of the Knowledge Network, who will share a little bit of insights on how they collaborate with universities, what the Knowledge Network is, and how this would fit into our objectives. And we'll close with a project we're working on at my university together with Sjoerd Eshuis, trying to expand the ambitions of the USSG. In the meantime, for those of you who are joining online, if there's any comments, questions, you can just make yourselves known in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as well. And other than that, we're going to jump into the panel. And the first speaker we have is Olaf Steinberg. Olaf is now working as a senior data analyst at the International Federation of the Red Cross. He is a student information management for last year with me, and has since taken his first steps into this world. So Olaf, if you don't mind, I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you, Kenny. I think you should be able to see and hear me. Is that correct? I think
so. We can hear you. We'll see if I can enlarge your image here in the room a bit.
Perfect, thank you. And thank you for providing the platform. Yes, I can see myself as well. Yes, which is actually, I'm really enthusiastic about being here today, because it was exactly a year ago that I just graduated from Tilburg University, information management student back then. And I was in the position, and I figure a lot of you are in right now, still orienting where I want to go, where do I want to focus. Quite convinced that I wanted to do something with humanitarian aid, and the combination of humanitarian aid and data. But not sure what, so still orienting. And back then I was active for the USSG, for the HMPW as well, presenting about organizational culture, and which was an extension of my thesis I did on data responsibility in the humanitarian sector. Shortly after that, I, as Kenny already said, started working for the IFRC. And that's now already been almost a year. So time flies, but it's been an amazing experience. Do you have the slides I sent to you, Kenny? Could you press next, or should I share my screen? Ah, perfect. Thank you so much. So that was in March. I graduated. Then the HMPW was shortly after. And I think this is a great opportunity a year later to share some of the experiences. What did I experience from that transition from university into the humanitarian system? And shortly after that, how has the past 12 months been for me? Just to give you also an insight into what working for the IFRC entails, and what working within the information management data analysis field means in the humanitarian sector. After the thesis, I did on responsible data management. So it's about how do we collect data as a humanitarian sector, and how do we do that responsibly? How do we not just collect data, but how do we really make sure the data we collect is stored well? How do we make sure we don't collect too much data? So it's the purpose specification of data. I work with Kenny. Kenny helped me on translating that into a research paper. We then published, and we were accepted to ICIS 2021. So that's the academic side. And then I went on to present for the HMPW. I volunteered for the Netherlands Red Cross. And one really important thing I stressed at the bottom is the orientation. So when I graduated from the university, I had a sense of what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know what the opportunities were in the humanitarian sector and what my interests were. So a lot of humanitarian news, articles, reports, really reading into what does the UN do, what does the IFRC do in other countries, in other continents, and then really trying to find out where is my main interest, trying to make as much notes as possible of what I read, trying to make figures. I like to visualize everything I read. So I have these, I can't show them right now, but I have these large A3 format white papers where I just would draw lines and emphasize things, just for me to really get a sense of the connections I could make and my position in the system as well. So that's Relief Web as well, The Economist, all kinds of different sources, whatever suits your interest. That's a large tip I would give. And then conversations with humanitarians is something I had a lot of value from, connecting with people on LinkedIn. So I connected with someone from the IFRC and then got into a conversation, and kind of from there on found this position as well. So you see those indirect connections are really valuable. And for my thesis, I also had connections with people, with information management people from the UN, from also from the IFRC. So you see that, yeah, trying to connect as much as possible, both from an career perspective, so seeing maybe those people can give you like an entrance into the humanitarian system, but also from an orientative perspective. It's really important to talk with a lot of people, also to get a sense of what they do on a daily basis, and if that would be interesting for you. And then I put at the bottom, and I consciously put it at the bottom, applying. So, and that's the second tip, or the third tip I would like to give is when you come from university and you're trying to orient, take a lot of time to orient yourself before you start applying. Of course, it's important to apply and to look for positions, and but at the start, one of the things I did was apply a lot. So I saw a lot of positions with the UN, with the IFRC, and I decided to apply to a lot of those positions. But after a while, I kind of shifted towards applying just for instance, one position a day, really looking into the position itself, seeing is this interesting for me, and really trying to create a motivation letter, so really specific to that position. And that's one of the advices I can give now that I've been working with the IFRC for a month and I've been involved in the application process as well. It's better to apply for one position a week and really be motivated, really be enthusiastic about that one position, than applying for instance, 5 positions or 10 positions or 20 positions. Yeah, it's really about being able to motivate yourself, or to provide your motivation for that position. That's yeah, from an organizational perspective, that's what we are looking for. People who are really motivated for a specific position, who can tell you why the IFRC and why this position. So that's kind of the tips I can give. Maybe one of the things I can share is that it's, just to be completely honest, it's quite a difficult sector to get into. From university, you might, it's because it's so versatile. There are so many different aspects you can work in. Different organizations, small NGOs, large organizations, governmental organizations, even commercial organizations you can work for. So you have all these different ways of going into the humanitarian sector, and that comes back to orientation again. Take your time to orient and apply. And applying can take a while. That's also one of the characteristics of the humanitarian sector. Sometimes it can take a while before you get feedback, before you get before you get a message back, but that shouldn't demotivate you. Know that organizations do have you on their eye. It's just yeah, it's just it may take a little bit of extra time to get into the sector, but it's worth it, I would say. And I'll explain why. So in June, I had my first day with the IFRC. Could you move to the next slides, Kenny? And then within 6 months, I was attending ICIS 2021, as I said, which I wrote a paper for, which got published in Austin. So that was my first business trip already, which was a great experience to meet other academics, other people from the humanitarian sector. And then last 2 months, almost, I've been to East Africa, Malawi, where there was a tropical storm in January. I've been there for 2 months, so I got the opportunity from the IFRC, and I worked there as an information management coordinator. So that was another great experience. I would want to tell more about, but I think I already matched the 10 minutes Kenny allowed me. So I'll leave it on this, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of the road I took, and I'm still currently on with the IFRC and the opportunities I've been given. So
thank you, Olaf, for your presentation. I saw there is a question from online from Vanessa. Vanessa, can you type your question in the chat, or I can give you the permission to unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself if you want. Oh, I think she jumped off the call.
You're frightened.
Exactly. Take your stage fright in front of the. Olaf, just a question from my side. How, because the study you've done, information management, doesn't really, at least at our university, not really a humanitarian one. How much have you used from your studies in your job? Is it zero, everything, or how would you gauge that?
No, it's true that there were no humanitarian crisis management courses in the study program. The program does allow you to focus your thesis on specific topics. So that's where I really was able to apply a lot of the concepts which may be more seen as general, such as data analysis, data collection, which you get more of a general knowledge base during your studies, and then within your thesis you can apply that to a specific sector, to a specific topic. And that really allowed me to kind of apply data collection to the humanitarian sector. So you can make this crossroads, but you have to make the crossroads yourself because you lack the courses within the curriculum. But then if you're talking about data collection, data analysis, you see that a lot of concepts are aligning with the humanitarian sector. So it might be different data collection for a humanitarian organization because you have these, you have a lot less time to collect data. For instance, you have different data security aspects, so it's different, but then at the same time it's there are similarities to collecting data as an organization, as a business. So I think the program has been really preparing me for the humanitarian aid as well, but I had to apply it to my thesis in order to really get to the specifics of the humanitarian sector. So it's the combination, I would say.
Thanks, Olaf. Are there any questions to Olaf already, or we can do it after all the speakers spoken? I'm not sure if there's any questions for clarification in the room or online in the meantime. Yes, please.
I mean, it would be interesting for me to know, coming from an academic background, how it feels to go into a real life disaster setting like you've experienced in Malawi.
Did you get that, Olaf, or you want me to repeat?
Yes, I did. Yes, it's something I must say. It's from a personal interest, something I always wanted to do. So really apply my academic interest, academic knowledge to the field. And it's also still part of the orientation if I wanted to move more into the academic field or more into the disaster management field, as to say. So I'm still in that orientation. So from that perspective, it was a great way to really see what I wanted from a personal perspective. Then the transition is quite large, because from an academic, you are a lot more doing desk research, a lot more, and that's one part I really like. And then it's this part of really going into a disaster, of really seeing people being affected by a tropical storm, by a cyclone, by a flood. It's you kind of are able to add a lot of context to what you've written on an academic level. You might read about data collection, and then you go into the field, and then you see what data collection is really like. And I would say, from my perspective, it's really valuable to do both, to see both the academic field and the practice. And I think Kenny and Jörg also have seen both, so they're probably able to testify that as well. but the transition is quite large, I would say. Yeah, that's kind of what I have to say about it. I can go into more detail, but yeah.
Yeah, we can always facilitate context if you want to know more, but I like the message of Olaf. There's a difference between the theoretical model and the real world, and it's nice, both have a value, and it's nice to experience both. Looking a bit at the time, we're going to move to the next speakers. Jörg?
Yeah. Thank you, Kenny. And before we come to the next speakers, can you please just let us know your name and your affiliation so that we get a little bit of feeling of who's in the room?
Sorry.
Elaine Donderer, I'm the founder of Humanitarian, the Human Network, private sector.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, looking into the program and at this slide, we would now have to hear Joshua Aponzem. Joshua, are you somewhere in the participant room? Because I cannot see you among the panelists. And there is also the second person that was announced, Mashauri Moliro. Mashauri, are you around? Because we have descriptions like room 9, so I don't know if you might be there.
That's the laptop over there.
Okay, so then it's obviously none of our speakers. Okay, in this case, just to let you know, Joshua and Mashauri, they both have been students with our institute in Bonn a couple of years ago. And this is why I invited them to share their experiences. So Mashauri is from Congo DRC, and he just was appointed as a disaster risk reduction officer with the UNDRR, so the Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And maybe he is on his way from Congo to Nairobi to take his office. And the other colleague, Joshua, he got very active in the climate change environment, and he's the founder of an NGO, humanitarian NGO also too, which is called Green Africa Youth. So he is very active also in giving a voice from the youth perspective. And he's currently in Nepal. Yeah, so these are the uncertainties that we have to live with. But in disaster management, typically you at least have one plan B. And in this case, the plan B has a name, and the name is Stephen. Stephen Kwasi, with us here in the room. Stephen is from Ghana, and he was kind enough to volunteer because literally, I was not even aware that he is in Geneva. So we met this morning, and I asked him when he entered the room if he would be ready to jump in if the others are not available. And so please give some credits to Stephen. And Stephen, the floor is yours just to share some experiences from your side.
I would just, Stephen, invite you to sit here, because then people online can see it.
And you're visible. So this is
don't
really
have my email. And
so this is really one of the last minute decisions that may come to you in typically disaster management. So Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Once again, just as Professor Ayo just said, I've also had a lot of experience. I wouldn't say a lot, but so with the humanitarian journey, I would say humanitarian should be something of passion, because in my humanitarian journey, when I was having my bachelor's degree, I joined an NGO, which was a non-profit organization, that is Project Hope Foundation, which was meant to help the needy, as the orphans. So I just joined as a volunteer member during my bachelor's degree. So I would say that is where I started everything from. And it was a nice experience because, dealing with it together with your studies wasn't that easy. So we always have to make sure that you combine both as well, because it was such a difficult task. Sometimes we had to move to very remote areas just to give out aids to the needy. So that is why I'm saying it should be something of passion, because I had a passion for it. That is where it started from. And after that, after my bachelor's degree, I still continued with it. And then later, I started working in National Disaster Management Organization, that is NADMO. So I was also working as a disaster control officer. So dealing with disaster, where we also moved to disaster scenes to help people to, make sure that we give out aids to those who have lost their items, and then also provide some shelter for those who have lost their buildings. That is also something of, that is where I kept on with the humanitarian road, because I think I knew the fact that since I've already had a little experience for my bachelor's time, I still had a passion. And when I was working with the National Disaster Management Organization, together with, I was still within in the same NGO project or foundation as well. So mixing the two of them together was something that I would say was very good for me. So I started having that passion to be in that same road during that time. And then right after my bachelor's, 3 years after working in National Disaster Management Organization, I came to Germany to pursue my master's at United Nations University. So that is to study MSc Geography of Environmental Risk and Human Security. And then within that course too, I had a chance to be introduced to a lot of courses, especially in the humanitarian field as well, where I was introduced to one course, Disaster Management and Humanitarian Response, spearheaded by Professor York. So it was such a nice course, because sometimes you have to learn the theory, but how do you also put it into practice? So learning that specific course, we also had a chance to do an online field-based scenario simulation exercise, where we went to German academic exchange, German academic disaster risk reduction exchange in Avila. So we had a chance to put what we had learned into practice. So we did a scenario-based exercise under the UNDAC mechanism, and then that also helped, because there were a lot of, as I went, most of my colleagues who hadn't already had a passion for the humanitarian side, right after the section, many of them were like, oh, I've really loved this, and then I would like to maybe be in that field. They wanted to even do their master's thesis within that same field because of the experience that they had, because it was such a nice experience, because we had a chance to perform like a real life scenario base, where we were asked to, we were acting like the UNDAC members that were deployed to Afghanistan, to Pakistan, to also help to coordinate a flood disaster area. So that exercise also helped a lot, because it's also giving people the feel for them to know how it looks like to be in the humanitarian side. So adding all of these things to my past experience, I think it has really helped me a lot, because I even had a chance to still pursue my internship with UN OCHA. And I was also working at the emergency response section, specifically under UNDAC. And I was also kind of a bit fortunate, because when I started my internship in February this year, there was this tropical cyclone disaster that occurred in Madagascar. That is tropical cyclone Basirai, which happened in February. And my supervisor, Itamula, he was actually deployed, and then he also served as the team leader for the UNDAC deployed team. And since I've also, learned a lot, had a theoretical aspects in the humanitarian side and disaster management, emergency response section, and witnessing all these things, having the experience also helped me a lot, because I was also managing the virtual on-site operation coordination center, because this COVID stuff, we have to do the physical on-site, that's the face-to-face one, and also do the virtual one. So I was actually managing the virtual one, where I was updating and sharing information, humanitarian information concerning situation reports on the scene, whatever has happened in the affected country to people. So I was responsible for sharing all this information on the virtual also. And then I also helped to prepare. I also managed the deployment list. That is the UNDA team that were deployed to Madagascar. I also assisted, and then I prepared the deployment list, assisted by my supervisor as well. And then having the chance, even though I worked for only 3 months, I did my internship for 3 months, and then I finished just last month. I've really learned a lot, and then I think being in the humanitarian field is something that I always tell people to at least, if not being something maybe permanent, maybe you should have a passion to, combine it with whatever thing you are doing, because it's very good. And then because to deal with human welfare is something that is not, you just don't have, you can't just do it. It comes willingly. So you just have to develop that kind of passion to help and also to do that. So after that, for now, I'm actually working on my master's thesis, and I know I'm still within the humanitarian area. So I would say this is what so far I have from the academy for now. Thank you.
Great, Stephen. Thank you so much. Please join me. Oh, yeah, from theory into practice. That's a good example. And I think Stephen will be with us for the entire conference. He's also supporting the organization. So if you have any question to Stephen, please feel free to get in contact with him, also regarding the master program or whatsoever he described. And yeah, I think it's a very good example. If you have already some background, some knowledge from a national disaster management agency or from an NGO who is working in that field, I think this is by all means the very good first step into this very broad and dynamic field of humanitarian response, because we do need so many transdisciplinary expertise and capacities in that system. So this is really an open door for everyone. Okay, so after Stephen, the second plan B, is there somebody in the room who would like to volunteer to take the place of Stephen very immediately? If we don't have Joshua or Mashauri online somewhere, and I think this is not the case.
We have Maria. She's ready.
Okay, then we move over to Maria Mclean from Finland. And Maria is the executive director of Safe Globe, also a humanitarian NGO. And she has been working in a quite big range of different safety and security entities around the world. And with this, we would like to give the floor to Maria, please.
Thank you very much. It is a huge honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm trying to share my PowerPoint, but I am unfortunately seem to be unable to do so. So I will just actually tell you what I would have presented.
Maria.
Okay.
Security for everything.
Okay, yes, that's great.
You'll be able to do it now.
Okay, this will stop others sharing. Okay, excellent. I think here we are. And I will put this in presentation mode, and there we may be. I think all of these Corona time presentations have slight complications in the beginning. So my name is Maria Mclean, and I'm the executive director of Safer Globe, which is an independent think tank that produces knowledge and information for lasting peace and security. We started from the need to produce high quality information and expertise on peace and security, but from there also our focus has been the people who are in the worst possible situations, and conflict, of course, drives humanitarian need. So increasingly, we are looking at this peace and humanitarian nexus. We are a registered association, and we have me, the executive director, board, advisory board, and a fellows network. And we are based in Finland. My background is that I have a master's in international relations. I also have an MBA and a BA. I've done a lot of, but the the reason why I'm kind of unique in the field is that I bring three different components. One is that I have a lot of this kind of academic research background. But the second, and some other speaker also talked about practical experience. I was working in Liberia. I'm also European Union crisis management trained. I've done peace mediation training and so on and so forth. But I have enough kind of practical experience, even though I haven't been in the field for years and years, that I am kind of, how should I say, credible. But then the third thing is that I'm an MBA and I actually run an organization. So I have to deal with things like final financial statements and human resources and employer and employee contracts and employer law. So what I thought that I would really focus on right now is this kind of position of being an employer. And this is actually one where I'm quite a key driver in Finland for basically saying we need more places of employment. And I also employ about 5 to 20 people annually. Unfortunately, many of these are only for short contracts, but nevertheless, one of my, in addition to making the world a better place, one of the main things that I'm motivated by is actually paying salaries for people. And since we're a small organization, I'm the one who presses enter and pays salaries. And every time I'm able to do that, I'm extremely happy. So for just on my personal interest, before I start discussing more about the jobs and the job market, what's driving me currently is just thinking about how do we do things better when the world is becoming more complicated and more complex. So what does it mean that the world, that when there are so many uncertainties ahead of us, how do we improve what we're doing? And maybe there's three rings that you should see. What I've been thinking about a lot is the role, not just of research, but especially of development and innovation. Then in the kind of planning and monitoring, the role of evaluation and feeding into planning. This is this PME cycle, as it's called, is very typical in the development field and very typical in the peace building field. Not so typical in the security fields or in the humanitarian field, where planning tends to be pretty linear. And then last but certainly not least is the humanitarian development piece, the triple nexus, and what it could mean in practice. And there my focus is really quite a lot on how do we improve implementation. And since I also work with especially the Finnish government, I'm often a person who asks about funding streams. So where is the money? How is it going? Who is paying for what? But then there are also really interesting new approaches to do with working in complex environments. So one of the perspectives that we've been looking at is appreciative inquiry, which is where you basically only ask positive things. So how has your colleague done something really, really well? What went very well in this operation? That is actually quite exciting, because often the situations are so difficult that we operate in that very often talks begin with, well, it's awfully difficult and it was really horrible and it's becoming even more difficult. And it is thus, the operating environments are really complex and extremely difficult. So then there's a question, well, what do we do with it? And the second thing that we've been thinking a lot about is so-called Agile Planning, which is actually from IT development, where you have strategic planning all the while. But I guess for much of the field, there is this question of, well, how do we do more with less? But then to how we support career paths, and this is from my experience. I think often a challenge is that we're actually not supporting career paths, but there's beginnings, but then there's kind of huge ravines. And sometimes it seems like there's a kind of a series of nearly insurmountable obstacles that some people do surmount and some people manage to get forward. But often we see quite a big pyramid where there's quite a lot of people who start. But then when you look at people in the 40s or, senior management, then you start noticing that quite a lot of people also leave the field. And so there's a need to look at thinking about different steps for career paths. Is it possible to, for example, work locally in your national context and have humanitarian or peace operations, have steps outside the system come back? What about with international organizations? Often people kind of have fully international career paths, but this works for some, and for others it doesn't work. And for what we see in Finland is that previously there was quite a lot of discussion, especially to do with women's careers and women's careers related to having children, how do you do these very difficult jobs. But now it seems that discussion has actually turned into a discussion about elderly relatives. So a lot of people want to return from the field because their parents are getting old, they're not getting the care that they should. It's very difficult to be in a humanitarian environment if you're worried about how your Alzheimer's mother is getting medication at home. But then it also seems that national partners and organizations, we're not seeing a lot of support from them. So one of the things that we're now trying to do in Finland is that we actually have a labor union. And we are hoping that the labor union would start to discuss so-called hybrid careers and start representing people with hybrid careers in Finland. And then this directly links to labor laws and abilities to get different kinds of benefits as an employee, but also makes the field more visible. Very often, it seems that there is a lot of strategy saying that employment is necessary, but understanding that employment requires effort, funding, and strategic coordination is maybe less so. And it would be really important to get this idea of forestry management. But in forestry management, you need to have the young trees growing and the kind of established trees, and then you have the trees that will be collected soon. But this kind of a cycle where you do really need to raise the experts of the future. Really excited about future opportunities, especially perhaps whether it might be more possible to be kind of a remote humanitarian in the future, whether there might be new kinds of humanitarian analysis, and how this kind of local international work will kind of start gelling together, and whether it's necessary to have a fully international career path or whether you can kind of jump back and forth. That's going to be quite interesting. Then I have some tips for those looking at employment based on what I see again. The first tip is strengthen your marketable skill sets. We get a lot of people who have just graduated from university. They tell us about their research, but what I need are people who are able to do social media, who know project planning, who can do killer PowerPoint slides. So any of these marketable skill sets that you can kind of support your academic skills with kind of practical skills, I think are really important. Create networks, both personally and between organizations. So LinkedIn and Twitter are brilliant, but also support others. So use nudges and remember that you actually have quite, pretty good networks, and you can actually nudge people pretty well. One intern at this international organization said, for example, suggested that I would go and talk. And so they said, oh, that's a great idea. So I went and I did the talk, and it was actually quite uncomfortable because I really was kind of I was quite different in that context. Maybe that's why. And so then another junior person tweeted afterwards how how it was great that I was speaking. And so the organization was like, well, it's good that we did something out of the box. And I was very grateful to both of these juniors for supporting me. Also support organizations you would like to work for. So if they're NGOs, you can often join them, but social media is really where it's at. And then think about the opportunities, of course, and international opportunities. I'd like, and this also is for us professionals, there is a need to think about money. And especially when there are a lot of government agencies, then considerations of money kind of become secondary, that people assume that there's money, but sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. Organizations may be surprisingly poor, or they may be what I call weirdly poor here. So they may have weird funding regulations, they may have budgeting regulations, they may have reporting cycles. But employment requires money for organizations. And I know some huge, big organization that had millions in its budget, but was not able to buy coffee for the coffee room because of the way that the financial structures were. So they were not able to actually also employ students. And it seemed completely nonsensical because you saw, people came in and they saw, wow, this amazing, big organization. And so thought, well, of course they can employ people. Of course they have fantastic coffee. But the way that the financial structures had gone, they were not able to. Some of the financials are multi-annual, some are only annual. Typically for part-time job, in my field, it's really good to ask for part-time jobs in kind of October, November, January. That's when you're, November and December, that's when you're most likely to get them. But it's also really good to figure out if there is funding for what you would like to do, and if so, where. I think I see quite a lot of students who have come up with their own phenomenal idea. And actually there are no funding structures currently that would fund their phenomenal idea. And so then if you want to take that kind of ideas forward, then you should be figuring out a funding structure as well as the phenomenal idea, and that gets overly complicated. Respect time, and I think time is also a resource, so respect time for management, ask direct questions. I think most senior people are really happy to give people 15 minutes or one question, but if it's 2-3 hours, then it might be too much. Use volunteer positions strategically, figure out what you would like to do and where you would like to do it. Good way to get small project-based work. And often also organizations, if they can, they'll try to recruit people from volunteer positions because open recruitment is very time consuming and resource planning. So mentor and coach one another, bake a bigger cake for everyone. So if you are able to, try to, every opportunity is an opportunity more. So do support one another and create networks and LinkedIn and give each other recommendations. I'll come as my last one, I'll come back to the 9, but I'd also like to remind everyone that depending on where you work, employment law is really the employment law. So we need to work with the employment law. So we, for example, are offered free internships, but we cannot take them because this is not legal in Finland. And sometimes there are lots of hurdles that you have to jump through to be recruited. But young people often also, they say, why didn't I get the job? And often they think it's because I was bad, that I wasn't good. And if only I had been good enough, then certainly I would have gotten the job. And from the employer side, I can say that very often that is not the case. That really often it's not really about you or your skill sets in the last part of recruitment processes, but it's about the general general team and what kind of skill sets are needed, but also things like funding, funding limitations. So if you've said that you need to have a communications officer, and then you get someone who has a research background, and then you get someone who has a poorer research background, but has done some social media, then you'll need to go with that candidate because of the funding regulations. So the structural challenges can be really tough, but do expect to, apply to a lot of jobs and don't let it get you down. And the final point is that it is okay to change paths as well. But I'd like to just ask each one of you to not disappear for good. So in addition to the people who are doing the kind of disaster work, the humanitarian work, and the peace work, there is a need for support for those fields, local, international business support, and do then support if you decide that your path goes somewhere. So don't disappear for good. We, for example, with the Ukraine, we've had amazing collaboration with companies where some former interns of ours now work, which has been brilliant. All right, thank you very much. I thought that I would give you a joyful octopus in the end.
Thank you, Maria, for your presentation. We'll wrap the questions until the end, looking a bit at the time, but we have the contacts of each other. We can help you facilitate connections if there's direct questions, but at the end of the session, we'll come back to any general questions, just with an eye on the time. But thank you, Maria. I really like your perspective of adding the responsibility also on the employers and looking at HR management as a forest of growing new trees and not just focusing on the one tree but let 1,000 flowers bloom and see what emerges. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go to the next speaker, and that is going even further into the career and going to some of the organizations that Maria already mentioned, the EU. So we're very happy to have Mr. Felix Bloch join us from DG ECHO to share his insights. Felix, welcome to this session.
Hi, Kenny, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you, and it's such an interesting and rich panel. I think it shows us that there's probably not one single career path in this area. Probably there's not only in this area, but there's generally not one single career path, and the diversity is huge. And let me add my few additional elements here. I'm head of unit in the European Commission at the Directorate General for Humanitarian Aid and Civil Protection. And I am a commission official. I've been working, started working in the commission in 2005, so a couple of years ago. And I'm trained as a lawyer. And during my legal studies, I would have never thought that I would end up dealing with humanitarian aid and civil protection. Lawyer by training, I did think, though, at the time when I was studying, that there are fields of activity for lawyers that are more interesting than just, company law, company A asking money from company B and so on and so forth. But that there are legal questions pertaining to international matters, international law, peace, law of the sea, and all of that, which are really, really interesting. So although lawyers' careers may seem dull, I don't think they actually are, because you can do interesting stuff. So right now I'm heading a team of around 27 people, dealing mostly with a thing called the Union Civil Protection Knowledge Network, and I will come back to that a little later. Maybe some additional points before that. I think it's crucial when you're pursuing your career keep an open mind at all times. And that means really an open mind. Don't be obsessed with humanitarian aid or civil protection or disaster management. This may right now be what makes you tick, but there are so many things out there. So don't be obsessed. I have started my career with the intention to go into international trade law at the Commission. I then had my first post in agricultural policy, which I did not really like. I did not think that this was a very interesting field. I then discovered how very interesting it actually is, and I stayed there for 10 years, just to illustrate. This was not what I was going to do, but I found it's super interesting. So you may not see, the very interesting things that are out there. And after those 10 years of agriculture, I end up in humanitarian aid. There you go. So it's important to stay open-minded at all times. Of course, it's also key. The second point is that you find something that interests you, that helps you to get up in the morning and go to work. And as Maria said, it's also important, of course, that you find something that pays a little bit. And I would subscribe to Maria's point, don't accept unpaid internships. You can find better options than that. This shouldn't exist in the first place. So the Commission is, of course, a big institution, and I was wondering for a second if Maria, when she was very diplomatically referring to one big organization that astonished her, maybe for the bureaucracy, if she wasn't talking about the European Commission, because it can be quite a complicated administrative setup sometimes. But nevertheless, on a 9th of May, which is in the European institutions, the Schumann Day, and actually a public holiday, you see the job still makes me get up in the morning, even on a public holiday. I'm happy to join you. So the EU institutions are still a great employer and a very interesting employer, I think, very diverse. And despite all its difficulties, those European institutions, I think, are still among the best things that politics have achieved in Europe in the past century. Now, the role of the European Union or the European institution in humanitarian aid and disaster management is, of course, growing and will continue to grow in the future. Because obviously, I sometimes sarcastically talk to my colleagues and say that it's great, we're in business. We've just been through a pandemic, or we're not quite through the pandemic yet. Then we're facing war in Europe. So we're in business. And that's true. And climate change will keep us in business. And we know that now. So this is, if you will, cynically, a promising career path, because we will need more and more and more disaster managers as we will be facing more disasters in the future. So DG ECHO is the service of the European Commission that deals with humanitarian aid and disaster management. And it is a large organization, after all, both headquartered in Brussels, but also in the field, as we call it, the field. So you have ECHO officers around the world looking at humanitarian aid, supporting projects that the EU would finance, monitoring projects that the EU would finance. And employment there is not limited to EU nationals, by the way. So you have local staff that is hired. So there as well, you have opportunities, both at headquarters and at the field. Now, of course, as a head of unit managing one of those teams, I get a lot of applications. I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but almost. And I would just like to underline also what Olaf mentioned in his previous presentation. Please target your applications. You cannot expect from managers that are recruiting and that are busy with things, with a lot of things apart from recruiting, to look into applications that are visibly not targeted, where the applicant clearly does not understand well what the post is that he or she is applying to. So you need to invest in each and every application, and it's better to send fewer applications which are well drafted and well targeted than just sending standard emails, which will only trigger, if at all, a standard reply saying that thank you, but no thanks. Because you need to appreciate that, you know, an application targeting, you know, for instance, my unit that deals with the Union Civil Protection mechanism, and then talking about an applicant that applies because he or she wants to work in humanitarian aid. Well, we do not specifically work in humanitarian aid. It's the civil protection mechanism that we're working for right now, and so this is public information that you can expect applicants to read and understand before sending an application. I assume that most of you do that anyway, but mind you, I get a lot of applicants applications which visibly do not do that, and it's a pity to see or to think about the time wasted by the applicants by sending these kind of applications. So please, just to, you know, in bold and underlined what Olaf had said, target your applications well. Anyway, so what do we do? If we don't do humanitarian aid, we are currently in the process of building up what we call the Union Civil Protection Knowledge Network. And I think Kenny, who's a great supporter of that network, in fact, he put the link to our web platform into the chat. This is a new development. It's only been launched about 6 months ago, so it's a very young network that we're hoping will strive and develop further in the years to come. The purpose is to connect stakeholders that deal with disaster management in Europe, but also beyond. There's no limits in terms of geographical scope. We look for stakeholders that are interested in disaster management, from the prevention, preparedness, and response phases. And this is a huge undertaking, as you can imagine, because as we move forward with developing the network, we just see the incredible number of stakeholders who all have something to bring to the table. And this fact that there are so many stakeholders, of course, makes our work a big challenge. At the same time, I can share that, you know, there is just so much employment opportunity out there as well, you know, be it in public or the private sector, NGOs. So there is a lot out there. Right now with the Knowledge Network, I think what we're doing is we focus on our core stakeholders at this point in time. So that would be the national and regional civil protection agencies and services. But we will not stop there. We will move on to broaden that network. And I would invite you to follow our work through that platform and see what's happening in the community there. I think this is, Kenny, what the main messages that I wanted to give, and mindful of the time, I should stop here. I could go on forever because indeed humanitarian aid, disaster management is a fascinating field, and I enjoy it very much, and I'm glad that there are lots of young students also interested in that field, because it is a very important field and it's also a very rewarding field. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix, for your presentation. Thank you so much. Especially like your comments that, you know, your own journey, that you started as a lawyer and not knowing about the humanitarian field. Often we heard from Stephen as well that, you know, there is people who have this connection, who have this background, but a lot of students and young generation, like others, may not be aware that the humanitarian world exists. Talking in my own experience, we have Capgemini, Deloitte, PwC recruiting students continuously before they even get to know that the EU and the UN exist. Thank you so much. With the eye on the time, maybe there's room for one or two quick comments or questions to Felix. But again, you know, he's building the knowledge network, so I'm sure he's contributing all his humanitarian knowledge to that network and the platform as well.
Besides a great thank to Felix, nothing from my side.
Excellent.
I actually have a little comment.
Yes, please.
If possible. It's
Would you mind just shortly introducing yourself? Your name
okay. My name is Hind Khalil. I'm from Morocco. I study in France, and I'm an intern at the Joint Environment Unit with the Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs. My comment is that the only problem, if I can say so, when it comes to the European Union is the fact that people who come outside of the European Union can't get the chance to do an internship. I'm thinking about the Schumann Fellowship. Like it's mainly people who are nationals of the European Union who are given the chance to do an internship or fellowship. And even though the European Union has a neighborhood policy, so I think it would be really interesting to give the chance to people who come from these countries to join, get the chance to do an internship and help you. They have a lot of things to give to the European Union. Like we speak different languages, we know our own countries. So I think that we have a lot of things to give, and it would be awesome if we can be given the chance to join, just at least for an internship. And yeah, that was my comment.
Thank you so much. You. Felix, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say that that's the only problem, but it's certainly one problem. Now, the internship program is a very big program, and it is in fact open to what we call third country nationals, so non-EU nationalities. But I know that this is the non-EU nationalities are in fact the exception, although it's possible. And why is that the case? Because I would probably make the following point here. The CVs that we get in the internship program are so incredibly good. And so the competition is extreme. And a lot of colleagues probably then prefer candidates from one of the member states. Now, that is not very good seen from an outsider's perspective, from a third country. And indeed, I fully agree with you that, of course, specifically regarding the neighborhood policy, it would be very rewarding and very good to have interns also from those countries. So it is possible, but it is true that we have one internship per year, and we probably get hundreds of candidates. So the competition is enormous, but I do agree that that this is a problem, and that there should be more opportunities there. So probably not more that I can say than that. Sorry for that.
No, thank you, Felix, for sharing your honest insights. And I guess this is, the backside of the bureaucracy is that Felix will be the boss. I'm sure it would change, but there's a whole political and bureaucratic machine around it. But it's nevertheless a good point you raise. And as Felix said, there's field offices of ECHO around the world. Try to get in touch with them as well, because they always look for local support and local staff as well. Thank you so much, Felix, for this. If you want to stay on the call a bit longer, if you have the time during your free day, you're more than welcome. But I also understand you want to go enjoy Brussels. Thank you so much. We'll move on to the last part of this session, which is hopefully a bit more interactive for those of you who are in the room or those joining online. Because this is a presentation from a project that we've been working on at my university. And so I'm not really talking now as the USSG. This is Kenny, as we normally in the humanitarian field, we all wear different hats. So this is my university hat. And this comes actually from this, the example that Felix has shown, because these are students that I teach, and same as Jörg, we often bring students to the humanitarian community. We try to invite them, immerse them, but not every student has this option. This is in DJ ECHO in Brussels at the European Emergency Response and Coordination Center last November, or October, if I'm not mistaken. November, thanks. What we want to do in this project that we're proposing to you is to open this up a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'll see if I can put this in the chat. So for those of you who are joining, we would like to first know a little bit about who you are. So if you could go to this site, woolclap.com, and I put it in the chat as well for those of you who would just like to know as a first question, what is your study background? It doesn't matter if that's ages ago or if it was yesterday or still ongoing, just to see what kind of people we have in this session.
So if everyone is joining, you can move to the first slide.
See some people with a QR code still, but I can also give you the link on the screen. This is the code for those of you in the room. Go to woolclap.com/HMPW.
For the study program or background, is that what you
Yeah.
do degrees in?
Sorry?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I think it separates, but at least international seems to be the core theme of the group here.
At least we're seeing some specialized fields and some more generalistic fields in here.
Yeah, international relations, humanitarian, obviously. But it's interesting to see also, I saw anthropology passing by, criminal law.
I see geography.
Geography.
Of course, environmental studies.
So it's interesting to see such a diverse group. I mean, there's core themes, of course, international, humanitarian, but if you look at the scope of studies there are, it's a pretty broad range we have here, from engineering sciences to social sciences, from humanities to organizational studies. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to look into this project, because this is a bit of my own experience. I've been to emergencies in the past around the globe, and I always found there are students and universities around where there are students with valuable skills to help in humanitarian response. I'd love to do mapping in Indonesia, but I don't speak the language. Why not go to the university and talk to the GIS department? In Nepal, we worked with the Institute of Crisis Management Studies to do assessments. And recently there are students in the Ukraine at my university who was collecting goods. But all of these students that you see in these pictures had no idea what humanitarian aid was or how it worked. So that's a bit what we're thinking. It's a bit of a pity almost that we have this young generation who apparently has valuable skills, knowledge and resources, who doesn't know about the humanitarian community, who doesn't know how to get in, who doesn't know the 600 acronyms and counting of the UN and the EU. I'm not sure if you kept track in this meeting, but so far I'm up to around 35. So our goal is actually, or what we're looking at, it's difficult to get in. It's difficult to be aware of that it exists in the first place, especially if you have PwC and Deloitte and the big companies approaching and pulling on the students. There's tons of websites with complex jargons and buttons. You know, for those of you who've navigated the HPW site and managed to get here, congratulations. But it's really aimed at already people in the humanitarian field. So we got some funding from the Royal Dutch Academy for Sciences to see what could we do to intervene, to bridge this gap between humanitarian organizations and what maybe I'm a Trekkie, but call the next generation. Record, Picard is the only captain that counts. So we're doing this with a team. Sjoerd is here as well. We have remotely Anna and Timo joining as well, and they're listening in. And we're working on this project. So what we've done is we've done 10 interviews, really deep dives with humanitarians and students from different backgrounds, 15 interviews with humanitarians and professionals who have been working with students. We've done a workshop, we had design sessions to really get an understanding of what do you run into if you're entering this field. And I guess all of you are already past this threshold for being here, being it remotely, being here in person. So this is where we are then with the findings of that study.
Yeah, so after conducting most of these interviews, we came across 3 different fields. And those are obviously the perspective of students, teachers, and the humanitarians or the practitioners. And to start off, students are often inspired by the mentors and by the social doctrines. For instance, if at your study, you're studying finance or law, and you keep learning about your future perspective at Deloitte or PwC because your teachers have derived from those fields, it's quite obvious for you to want to pursue the same career path. So mentors and the social doctrines are a huge factor, as well as they are opportunity driven, unaware that this being the humanitarian work field is an option. And usually they don't know how their study field relates to humanitarianism. And of course, there is the humanitarian lingo and the acronyms. In this meeting alone, I was just counting, I heard already 46 different acronyms. And there are a lot more of those when you actually try to navigate the online landscape. And from a teacher perspective, we're talking about teachers who already have a background in humanitarianism or related fields. There's always this timing alignment discrepancy. So if one of the humanitarian organizations asks you if you have a student that could support with a certain project, the time being that you spend with the student is quite limited, usually for a couple of weeks or months until a certain course is done. So it's just hoping that it aligns perfectly, and otherwise there's this big discrepancy. Further on, there are a lot of recurring questions. Efforts are creating relevant teaching materials. And from a humanitarian field, it's obviously quite a limited time to explain really basic concepts, understanding academic objectives and relevance, and not always being aware of the young relevance in these organizations. And we believe that students are quite hard to reach in a way that it's quite a fleeting group of people. You study for a couple of years, and at some point you're not a student anymore, and you're already part of the humanitarian community or the commercial field. But we have chosen to focus on the teachers, as they are the perfect bridge between the humanitarians and the students. So what we're building a global network of teachers around the globe that can be supporting in reaching students and raising awareness for these opportunities in classes. Because we don't only want people to know what they can mean for a Deloitte or PwC, but also how their study is relevant in the humanitarian fields by developing case studies, using humanitarian class materials, or simulating a crisis simulation. Besides that, we're building an online platform for those students who are inspired to learn more about humanitarianism, simply to find out more on how their study relates to humanitarianism, what opportunities are there, how can you get started, and all of these different entry points to humanitarian causes. And finally, we're looking at how to activate students. So how can we find the opportunities, and how can we match them to the right opportunities in the right time and in the right place.
Yeah, so it's really the eventual target audience are young generation, students at the university, youth in the community, but we do believe that we reach them through the teachers, and we should enable, you know, educators, teachers, or mentors, if you wish, from organizations to make it easier to in their job to activate these students. So one of the things we're developing is this online platform. For example, my study, what I teach is information management, has nothing to do in my studies with humanitarian aid. But the moment I have the students in my class, I have this one moment to tell them you should look into humanitarian aid. So this is one of the ideas that we have on the website, and I can show you later more detailed, is it really talks from an IM perspective. What does that mean for humanitarian? Not from the humanitarians, starting from the humanitarian side, it's starting from information management and how does that look like in the humanitarian field. So this is one way to engage the students. Another example that we're adding, and you know, feel free to brainstorm with us you know, throughout this, is frequently asked questions. You know, a lot of students, and I'm sure you has the same, I can write you down the 10 questions I always get asked. How much does it pay? How do I get a job? Do I get to live in a nice country? How do I get started? So again, to ease the burden a bit, we're taking the most frequently asked questions, whether they're applied to all studies or study specific, that people can find them. Even if students are not in my class and they study information management, they could still go here, you know, even if they haven't seen me in person or just a guest lecture. And then there's deeper dives. You know, in this session, we were making notes as well. We heard a lot of tips and tricks from Maria, from Felix, from Olaf, from Stephen. So we're trying to collate that as well in a relatable manner. Not only, you know, here are all the acronyms, but this is one example, 4 ways how you could get job experience, because a lot of NGOs are asking for it. You know, and we'll add the things that we've heard in this session as well. Also, as an article we have, the difference between an international agency and a local NGO. You know, we all think about, let's call them 50 Shades of Blue, the EU, the UN, right? But there's local organizations. Stephen already mentioned that starting in a local community, local NGO is also a way to get them. So what is the difference between them? So our goal is to facilitate the journey. We're not a matchmaker. We're not going to do LinkedIn job profiles. There's enough sites for that. But we want to, you know, you have already passed this threshold by being here. You probably know sites like ReliefWeb, but not all students are that lucky. Maybe your fellow students in your courses. How do you convince them? So our goal is to inspire them, show them the relevance, give them the knowledge so they can read the websites and the job openings, and then help them where to look for the opportunities. So we're not building a job or career site. If I would say, summarize it, it's almost like a concierge service. You show up, tell us what you need, and we'll help you where to look, what language you need, where to look. So maybe as the last part of the session, you know, this product is very much in development, this initiative. We would just like to ask you, again, on the same site, what do you think? Do you have any ideas? You're welcome to shout them as well, but being an information manager, I like to use tools for that. Let me switch back. So first one would be, what would have helped you in your first steps? Maybe that was today, maybe that was yesterday, again, maybe that was a long time ago, but what would, in hindsight, what would you have thought this would have helped me? A human library. So, okay, I guess it's sort of like a contact listing. Get in touch, great. Guidance, understanding the field better. If there's people who prefer the analog way of talking or chatting, that's also fine.
With human library, it's not only contacts, it's more like somebody giving you their time for you to ask questions.
Right.
Like what helped me a lot is to reach out to people in different fields and ask them, how did you get there and all of this, and just having like these 5 hours with different people.
Yeah, so
gave me so much
not per se
insight.
finding a job or something, but just to
No.
learn about the field and,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah.
somebody you could just ask your questions to.
Yeah.
I like the networking for introverts because it's a big and scary sector to approach. And I can really imagine that that might be quite an obstacle.
Okay.
All right.
Want to do one more?
Yeah, that's right. And I believe this one back. All right, thank you for your input on this question. And finally, what was your biggest obstacle or
So
challenge?
the last one for today, we want to know, what is the biggest challenge you faced so far in getting where you are now? For example, the EU doesn't hire internships. Let's call it bureaucracy or policy. Unpaid internship, yeah, financial limits. We'll chuck that on the one. Breaking in, so going to the field apparently is.
Knowing where to look.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take your inputs. We're going to keep working on this. In this, we will share the slides and the recording of the session with you. If you registered with the HPW, we have your contact. We'll also include some information about this project. If you have ideas, or you think this is missing, this is a bad idea, whatever you want to share with us, you're welcome to do so. Okay. Thank you so much for allowing us to introduce this project to you, and please mull it over. We'll be around. Feel free to talk to us. You want to join for the? You want to say any closing words before?
Any closing words? You're looking at me, Kenny. Okay.
Yeah.
I think most have been said already. I think it was important from Kenny to mention that, of course, we cannot build a professional job bazaar or something, but we stand ready to support, especially those who have been attending these sessions virtually or here in the room. So please feel free to contact us. We will be around for this conference for a couple of days. And it's important to see that you have experienced the different backgrounds of people. Yeah, you have seen people from economies coming in, a legal background. I'm a geographer, so I've started as an environmental scientist, and this is also one of my capacities to support the UN system in case of environmental emergencies. But you can see also with all your different backgrounds how you can contribute to the system, and that's important. And for us, I mean, there is no bigger success for teachers like Kenny and myself to see this next generation, the Trekkie vision, growing into your professional field. Yeah, and the students of today are our colleagues of tomorrow, and that's important. And it's really nice that students who have done their masters in Bonn are now colleagues in different agencies, entities around the world, and we are writing project proposals together. We meet each other in the field, and that is the important field. This trust in the community, and in the end, the humanitarian is a small community, and you end up with maybe some 200, 300, 400 people around the world that you meet constantly somewhere in the field. And maybe this is a starting day for some of us here. So we stand ready, please feel free. And thank you so much for your attention and participation here in the room and also online. Thank you.
All right. There are 3 more sessions. They're on the screen. So one is this afternoon on COVID-19, where students will be sharing more of their research, and tomorrow on floods.
Yeah, I kind of snuck into this session because I also recognize that the next generation is kind of where we need to be. So I just wanted to share a resource. Some of you said that you're not always sure where to look. So I work with ALNAP, so it's the Active Learning Network for Accountability and Performance in Humanitarian Action. And we have a jobs bulletin that we send out all the time with new jobs on it. Our members post there, and our membership is UN, Red Cross, local and national, international organizations, donors and academics. So if you're looking for somewhere that could be useful, it also has a lot of practical guidance of like what lessons have we learned from 10 years of earthquake response. So if you are starting a job as well, how do you do that effectively? There's lots of resources on there from a research evidence-based side, but it's all for practitioners. It's meant to be really practical. So it might be of use to you in the future when you do get those jobs. Thank you.
Could you please repeat the network? I didn't catch on.
So it's called ALNAP.
Okay.
I have, yeah.